Have you ever been in that situation where you try to be super direct to solve a problem and it just blows up in your face, making everything 100 times worse? Well, today we're going to break down a leadership strategy that seems completely counterintuitive, but it's incredibly powerful. It's called the indirect approach, and honestly, it might just change the way you communicate for good.
Right? It happens to all of us. You think you're being clear, you lay out the facts, you state the problem, and you expect a quick solution. But instead, you get defensiveness, you get arguments, and you end up with a brand new conflict you never even wanted. So let's get into why this happens, and more importantly, how you can sidestep that landmine completely.
All right, so first up, let's dive into what I like to call the direct approach trap. It's the go-to strategy we're all taught to use, but so often it's the very thing that ends up sabotaging our best efforts. We all learned this in math class, right? A straight line is the most efficient path from A to B. It's simple, it's logical. But here's the thing. People are not math problems. And when we try to apply that simple, clean logic to messy, complex human emotions and egos, it backfires spectacularly. And you can see the disconnect right here. Your goal, your intention was simple. Let's solve this problem. But the actual result? A power struggle. Your attempt at being efficient has accidentally triggered this defensive, confrontational response. The original issue gets totally lost, and now it's all about who's going to win the argument. Okay, so why? Why does this keep happening? Why do our good intentions lead to these terrible outcomes? Well, the answer isn't about logic or reason. It's because you're not just talking to a person's brain, you're talking to their ego, and their ego is always listening.
And this is the absolute key. See, you think you're addressing an issue. You think you're talking about a process or a behavior. But what they hear is an attack on their competence, their judgment, maybe even their identity. You're aiming for their logical brain, but you're landing a direct hit on their ego.
And from there, it's like a predictable domino effect. First, you give that direct feedback. Then, boom, the ego's defenses just shoot right up. The shields are raised. And by step 3, you're not having a productive conversation anymore. You are in an argument. And I know this might sound a little dramatic, but it really taps into a fundamental human dynamic. Suddenly, it's not about solving the problem together anymore. It becomes this primitive, subconscious battle for status, about who's right, who's in charge, and who gets to win. And in that game, the mission, the actual goal, always loses.
Okay, so if that head-on attack is a dead end, what's the alternative? What actually works? Well, that brings us to the real solution here, the art of indirectness. It's a way to communicate that bypasses the ego's tripwires completely.
The whole idea is actually adapted from military strategy. A frontal assault on a fortified position is almost always a terrible idea. It's costly and it usually fails. The smart commander maneuvers to the flank, to an area that isn't reinforced. In a conversation, this means you don't charge straight ahead. You find a different angle of approach, one where their defenses aren't even looking.
Just look at the difference here. On one side, you've got the direct attack. It's basically an accusation, right? Why did you do that? It shines a big, harsh spotlight on the person. But on the other side, the indirect approach, it's like a collaborative investigation. You're not pointing a finger, you're asking questions, showing concern, and offering to help. So the whole playbook here is about one simple shift, going from an adversary to an ally. You start with something positive. You ask genuine, curious questions. You don't assume you know their intentions. And most importantly, you offer help instead of judgment. The goal is to solve the problem with them, not at them.
Okay, I know what you might be thinking. If this indirect stuff is so great, why is our culture so obsessed with this image of the tough, yelling drill sergeant type leader? The boss who just barks orders. Let's bust that myth right now.
Let's just get it out there. This whole idea that the most effective leaders are tyrants, it's just a lie. It's a total myth. It makes for entertaining movies, sure, but it does not build great, sustainable teams in the real world.
So on the one hand, you have the stereotype we see in pop culture, right? The leader who dominates and controls. But the reality, where truly great teams are built, is something totally different. It's about being humble, about collaboration, and about being on a shared mission to make something great.
But it's a fair question to ask. If being a tyrant is so bad for business, why do we see these types of leaders who seem to be successful, at least for a little while?
Well, it turns out there are a few structural reasons this illusion can exist. First, the people at the top, they often only see the numbers, the output, not the burnout and chaos happening below. And a lot of the time, a great team will succeed in spite of their terrible boss, which makes the tyrant look good. And in systems with quick rotations, a toxic leader can get promoted and move on right before the whole team implodes. It's really just a short-term illusion.
And all of this leads to a really, really profound way of thinking about problems. It's a principle that, if you truly adopt it, will change how you view every single challenge you face on a team.
Just let that sink in for a minute. That's a radical level of ownership. It means that no matter what the issue is, a missed deadline, a safety violation, poor communication, you can almost always trace it back to a leadership gap.
See, it's not that people are just lazy or defiant and ignoring the rules. It's that they often don't truly understand the why behind them. If someone isn't following a safety protocol, it's probably because the leader hasn't effectively and repeatedly communicated why that protocol is so critical. True leadership is about giving people the context and the purpose.
So, let's wrap up with this thought. It's a question I want you to ask yourself the next time you're in an argument and you feel that urge to just prove you're right. You can win. You can prove your point. But what's the cost? What relationship? What trust? What ounce of future collaboration did you have to sacrifice to get that win? Is winning that one small battle really worth losing the war?